Good evening, and welcome to another episode of the Centrist Post interview series. When a person devotes his or her whole life to service of this country and achieves a level wherein they are working at the highest levels, well, that is a special individual indeed. My guest tonight is one such person. His military career began in medicine, and he moved into research and development of advanced defense weapons systems, intelligence, geopolitical strategy, and policy frameworks, defensive strategy, threat assessments, autonomous weapons systems, directed energy weapon development, and human performance enhancement. Folks, we're just scratching the surface of this impressive and humble patriot. He has passionately worked against adversaries of the U.S. and in support of allies like Israel and Ukraine. We live in an unbelievably dangerous time. Our words are dangerous, and we now exist on the offensive. Today, our conversation centers on the Russia-Ukraine conflict and President Trump. You will find this a very dense interview, so put on your thinking caps and hang on. My guest's information on what Trump knows, what he may not know, and how he has and is handling the conflict may surprise you. There were some hilarious moments and even some tears. Thank you for watching this very special interview. The Centrist Post welcomes a very special guest, Jeff Capella.
We want to, don't tell us. I'm not saying you can't have critical observations. That's not what you're doing, though. It's not objective. This is like a bitch session. We're trying to ensure this group. The reason I appreciate your group is because it acts as a focal point for track two material support that allows us to maintain some level of support for our Ukrainian allies, independent of what happens at the national level. And when you have people importing, it would be just as bad if people did it during the previous administration, right? I have a lot of reasons, professionally and personally, to hate Biden. Like his son stole my work regarding Ukraine. Like I'll send that to you if you'd like, the redacted email if you want. That's fine.
That's
Like the
heavy.
idea, yeah, well, I mean the idea. I mean, I'm one of the architects, not the only one. I'm one of them, though. One of the more earlier ones too, of having the United States assist the production of unconventional oil and natural gas in both Poland and Ukraine in direct response to Putin's illegal annexation of Crimea, because we're like, wow, Putin's not going to stop at Crimea. This is just a strategic pause or an operational pause. And because of all the things that go on, like Europe, Western European allies haven't invested in the national defense industrial base, like Ukraine has like one third of the population and about one fourth or fifth the territory. I mean, they're at a disadvantage, right? The idea was to support a clandestine offensive nuclear weapons program in Poland via helping Poland and Ukraine drum up production of unconventional oil and natural gas, and then present a fait accompli to Putin and extend this asymmetric deterrence umbrella over Ukraine so we wouldn't be in the fucking mess we're in now. I was ducking and
Yeah.
dodging leftists trying to kill my family at Syracuse. Like I went all the way up to Obama's Undersecretary of Civil Rights, all this. Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other. Anyway, the point is I got sidelined for 3 years. Hunter, some people in the GOP took the work, which I don't even care. I don't care if they stole it. I care they fucked it up, right?
Right.
Because if they didn't screw it up, we wouldn't be in this mess right now,
Right.
right? So, what keep all that to say, it was a very long roundabout way to say, I have a lot of personal and professional reasons to not like President Biden. That said, during President Biden's administration, while I support the office of the president independent of who's there. What does support mean? Support is not always agreeing. And it means you give someone the best analysis you can give based on a limited amount of time, information, and resources that are available because you don't want them to make a mistake. That's not what these new influxes into your group are doing. They're like Orange Man bad, and they're saying shit that isn't true, or it's like got a little kernel of truth and it's mixed in all this contextual bullshit. Like it
Yeah.
does, it
Well,
polarizes that group. I don't want it to dilute your mission. That's why I
yeah.
was so upset. I wasn't
Well,
angry at you. I was angry at what was happening to your group.
I had been out of the loop for a little bit and I hadn't been watching the page as much. And so I missed a lot of it. And
Oh,
Trevor moderates, and I see him sometime, he'll step in, and
Good guy.
he's so polite, and he'll, try to turn somebody and try to talk him out of it.
I
And,
tried that.
you know,
I got attacked every which way.
they yeah, they're, everybody's angry, and so I get it. But when I talk to people on the left, I tell them, the people that just loathe and hate Trump, oh God, I tell them, I don't care about that. I want my president, whoever it is, to be
Right.
successful. We have to have that. He has to be successful, you know? And what has been so shocking about a lot of this is, and frustrating about a lot of this, is that our president doesn't seem to understand some things. And I feel like, last night I was doing some research for, a group of people in Ukraine, and I'm looking at the timeline. I was pulling up these things on open source about the timeline between 2014 and 2020.
I already did. I'll send it to you. I'll send it. You feel free to use it.
Okay.
It compares like Obama to, Donald to Biden, and it's fair. All of it's sourced objective, like all of it's sourced on primary information sources and raw data. And then you go to like Fox News or
just
CNN.
The negotiations and the aggression.
That's exactly what my assessment did.
So I'm sitting here. So, and I'll bet you were doing the same thing. We're sitting there, and you're watching Mark Rutte, Jens Stoltenberg, and the Prime Minister of Norway. And Trump is talking.
He does a great job, by the way. Like, he does a really good job.
Well, and Trump was talking about what he knows about Ukraine, and they're trying to have a poker face to keep from grimacing, because it's so obvious that there's just so many, knowledge gaps in what he really doesn't know about all the negotiations that they might have tried. The first Minsk agreement that
Minsk
failed.
1 and 2, immediately after the annexation of Crimea, Putin's friggin' proxies violated both agreements. That's part of the things I was hammering. I sent that to you back in 2022. We were just like carpet bombing all these Putin apologists. What are you talking about? Like, Putin has violated every single agreement he's ever signed.
Right.
I promise you, I can say with the very highest degree of human certainty I possess, there is a very high degree of probability that Donald very much understands.
Okay, well, see, that's why we're doing this. I mean, we were wound up last night, and we were talking about this, and I want to know, because I believe he can learn, and I know that there's stuff that he knows. It's the problem is what he's saying makes him look like he doesn't understand or even know that Putin invaded Chechnya, invaded Georgia, sent the little green men into Crimea, all these bad things, of what a murdering that he is. Okay. Why? I get the fact that I get it, that he wants to do business with Russia. Maybe he doesn't want to see Russia fall.
That's not the motive.
Okay. So there's that. I really want to know what you think he knows and what he doesn't know. What do we need to teach him?
I'll share with you the best, my understanding is best, the observation is best I understand it. And to do that, I'll set up the framework, just the foundation, just like you had suggested, right? Comparing and contrasting policies between the past, from Obama to Trump 1 to Biden to now. So Obama, as you know, he's going for re-election, right? Obama's position towards, Putin's criminalized counterintelligence state, particularly under Medvedev, was one that was accommodative in nature. For instance, you had during the time in the first year of Obama's administration, Hillary Clinton pushed, and this is right on the State Department's website, for organizational and operational ties between Skolkovo, which is a front organization for Russian intelligence military agencies, after Skolkovo was busted by the Boston office of the FBI and European Command's intelligence as being a front organization, for organizational operational ties between Skolkovo and tech companies in Silicon Valley. That was that meeting where, she's like, we want a reset button. The Russian dude was like, this is not right word, right? She fucked that up, right? You have 2012. I'm just giving you snapshots to give you kind of an overview of what the general approach was. It was accommodation and appeasement. 2012 comes, right? Obama's trying to get reelected. Obama's caught on a hot mic with Medvedev saying that once he's reelected, he would have more flexibility to accommodate Putin's concern regarding missile defense position, sites in Poland. So he's betraying our Polish allies. He got hammered for that. Then, so what happens? Putin's illegally annexes Crimea. Obama fails to uphold the Budapest Memorandum. This was actually posted by Christopher on your Facebook page about how the Obama's administration failed to uphold the Budapest Memorandum and provided blankets and some night vision goggles and not lethal support to our Ukrainian allies. Me and a lot of other people who are pro-Ukrainian conservatives, in response to that legal annexation of Crimea, did a couple of things. One, me and somebody who now works for the Institute for Study of War, I don't want to say his name because it would be inappropriate to do so, did things like open measurement-based intelligence assessment, or I did it and gave it to him because he was working for a particular pro-conservative Republican, pro-Ukrainian conservative Republican in Congress, right? So did the open source measurement-based intelligence assessment on the T-14 Armada's manufacturing readiness level. Definitely helped him to sit there and find third-party sources to provide legal lethal support, so you're not violating the Logan's Act, because you can't do that. To try and cover some of the operational gaps that was left by Putin's or Obama's accommodative approach towards Ukraine. And then I developed that policy, or I was one of the main architects, one of the primary architects of U.S. national policy through my professor at IWP when I was doing my post-grad stuff. Institute of World Politics is a feeder school for the intelligence community, among other things. And the professor, he was on former President Bush's National Security Council. I'll just say that. I'll send you the email if you want to put it up in your video. It's fine. On drumming up, having the United States assist the production of unconventional oil and natural gas in Poland and Ukraine to provide both Poland and Ukraine funding streams to modernize their military. And with regards to Poland, develop a clandestine offensive nuclear weapons program and present a fait accompli to Vladimir Putin and extend this asymmetric deterrence umbrella to find his possession of nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles over Ukraine to sit there and deter any further aggression, because I didn't want to sit there. A lot of us understood this could lead to an escalatory war. Obama wasn't very happy. He wasn't very supportive of Ukraine. He just wasn't. He was busy doing other shit, not the least of which is you had certain members in the Obama administration that I hate using this term because Jen Psaki so adulterated it. Circle back.
Right.
I'll return to this. I hate that term.
Right.
Right. Obama's administration was very insistent, very committed to this really crazy JCPOA or Iran deal. And the main intermediary between the United States and the Mullah regime that illegally occupies Iran since 1979 was Putin's criminalized counterintelligence state. Right? So you had Mr. Sullivan, Burr, Kerry. That's the other reason why they didn't want to support Ukraine. So in comes here comes former President Trump first term. What does Donald do? He immediately gives Ukraine lethal support, roughly $230 million of Javelin missiles. He sat there and killed the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which is a $50 billion investment by Putin's criminalized counterintelligence state, and that was in direct response to what President Trump said in his first term to NATO members, Western European members of NATO. Well, I don't understand. How could you be asking us to protect you from from Russia, if you're buying billions of dollars from Russia? He's a valid point. Like, you're importing tens of billions of dollars from Putin's criminalized counterintelligence state that's directly underwriting his military modernization program, and increasing vulnerability because of your dependency on Russia for your oil and natural gas, and he wants to protect you. That's bullshit, right? Buy the oil from us and we'll protect you from Russia. We're not going to protect you from a guy you keep helping. What the hell is that? I mean, you have to be an honest, committed partner in NATO and putting and deterring Putin's aggression. You had Trump sat there and sanctioned the Russian oligarchs that were involved in a lot of the nasty shit they did in Donetsk and Donbass when Putin's proxies violated the Minsk I and II Accords. That was called CATSA. And while Obama created the European Defense Initiative, he didn't fund it. Under former President Trump's first term, the funding for the European Defense Initiative skyrocketed to the highest it was in 2019. You had Donald sit there and pull out of the INF Treaty in response to Putin violating the INF Treaty when Putin had, demonstrated he developed an illegal intermediate ballistic missile, the RS-26, which is the precursor for the Orishnik missile that was used to strike Dnipro. Right.
Right.
And at
Right.
the end of
Oreshnik. Yes. Right.
Rishnik, yeah, well, sorry, I mean, I'm from New York, so I have a little bit of a New York accent, right? Yeah. Um, I'll send you the assessment I did on the Rishnik as well as the threat assessment if you want. That's fine.
Fabulous. That's
So
fabulous.
Donald at the end is still providing, lethal support at the end of Donald's first term. And this is when he says, like, when he says, look, I understand that, like, Ukraine was the apple of Putin's eye. And he said, don't do it, Donald. This is what Donald said in a call to Vladimir Putin. I'm paraphrasing a little. Hi, Vlad. We're the best of friends. I said I have to call you because, well, I don't like to say this. Vlad, our intelligence looks like you're getting ready to go in Ukraine. Vlad, I hate to tell you this. If you do, I don't know what you call them, those little gold onion things on the top of the Kremlin. If you invade Ukraine, I'm going to have to blow them up. He said that. He said that to Vladimir Putin. The subtext is, if you invade Ukraine, I'm going to vaporize Moscow. That's why Putin didn't do that. He didn't invade under Donald because he went, holy shitski, this guy might actually let those missiles fly. In comes Biden. What does he do? Initially, he immediately reverses the sanctions on Nord Stream 2 because he's playing up to certain members in Germany that very much have organization operational ties to Putin's criminalized counterintelligence state because, like Germany, and while they're a very integral part of NATO, especially now because of their industrial base, and I have a lot of appreciation for certain elements in Germany, right there, like the anti-Russian elements. Like Russia's and Putin's criminalized counterintelligence state specifically has spent decades penetrating like any number of Western NATO countries, not the least of which is Germany, vis-a-vis, well, do business with Putin and you get rich by this bullshit oil deal, right? So
Right.
Biden removes the sanctions on Nord Stream 2 immediately. Great, just gave Putin friggin' a $50 billion allowance right there. And then, when it looks like Putin is getting ready to go into Ukraine, so Biden then paused. He literally paused the lethal support, much of which was donated or allocated under the latter part of Trump's first term to Ukraine from July to December of 2021. Biden has these certain ideas, right? He wants to immediately remove, like disengage from Afghanistan. A lot of us was said in both public and private. I'll send you the public thing that I said so you understand the time, date, and what I said. Do not recklessly disengage from Afghanistan. If you do so, it is going to sit there and ring the dinner bell for every other hostile actor in the world because it's going to signal a lack of U.S. resolve and embolden our adversaries. I even cited a specific book that I had to read at Georgetown. Here's what Gilpin says regarding strategic reentrenchment, right? And I named them. Putin's belligerency in intermarium, the Chinese Communist Party's increasing belligerency towards Taiwan, the Mullah regime's going to sprint towards a bomb, all the crazy crap Kim Il Ping Pong head is going to do on the Korean Peninsula, and the Alawite regime's increasing terror, facilitation of terror campaign against the state of Israel. Biden doesn't care, disengages, independent, and what happens? Like everything happens exactly. Everything happened exactly as we said.
Right.
So you get some people like, well, what's the difference between that? It was actually Donald that set that up. No. Donald definitely wanted to get out of Afghanistan. The difference between President Trump and President Biden was Donald's approach was based on conditions on the ground. Whereas Biden said this is a particular date arbitrarily set because he wanted to have this political whatever, September 11th, 2021. Sorry, coffee hasn't worked yet. So that now all our adversaries are going, wow, American resolve is crumbling. Time to start doing stupid shit. Putin forward bases his Iskander M's. I immediately start warning people in the previous administration through some of the back channels I had. Now the probability of Putin's criminalized counterintelligence state illegally like invading Ukraine is very high. We need to start flooding in a lot of weapon systems to Ukraine, up arming them in things that they can use initially. Something that, because time is of the essence, we have a lot of time. We have to give Ukrainian defense forces things they know how to use because they don't have time to train them for like 6 months. This is going to happen very quickly. So some of that starts to happen. We start flooding in Javelin missiles, Stingers, like, assault rifles, landmines, all that kind of stuff. The idea is to turn, Ukraine into this, essentially the mother of all insurgencies, right? And some of that stopped the Thunder Run on Kyiv. Yeah. Part and parcel of that was to buy time to provide Ukraine other things. There was like I was one of the people that did a lot of the sourcing for Eastern Soviet Bloc equipment because Ukrainians predominantly at that time, even though they were trained from 2014 on in how to apply Western military doctrine, which is one of mobility, right?
Right.
They still were using Eastern Soviet Bloc equipment.
Right.
And so they're like, shit, we got to give them stuff they can use right now. So, we're looking for things like MBT 60s, MBT 72s, like, MiGs, Tosca, surface to surface, missiles, all of that kind of stuff. Coterminously, we're trying to find things like what specific Western equipment they need to help give them put them on an equal footing or a more advantageous footing than Putin's thugs that are invading. So that's things like, okay, like I pushed for Gripens, other people said F-16s. F-16s are really good. They're like one of the best Gen 4 single engine fighters. Sure. Problem with the F-16 is it needs manicured runways. I mean, outside of the training, which needs like bare minimum 9 months, and that's so you can. It's not just like it's not just training. Doesn't mean I know how to turn all the buttons on, flick on the engine, and take off and land. It's can you apply this weapon system
in combat?
In combat,
right?
It's not the same thing as just flying up and landing,
right?
So you're talking about at least 9 months. The reason I centered on Gripens and people, like centered on F-16s, that was such dumb. Gripens, F-16s need a manicured runway, right? They have this huge air intake. It sucks up all these foreign bodies into the engine. If you don't have a manicured runway, you might get away with 1, 2, maybe 3 times after that. Your engine's junk and the F-16 doesn't work anymore. Whereas a Gripen was designed to operate in a post-nuclear attack environment. You can launch them off of a dirt road. So we were like working a lot of these different things. The previous administration under Biden slow walked a lot of that. Why? What was some of the thinking, at least to the best of my understanding? Biden's administration, this is going to go to Trump now. No administration is a homogenized bloc. So within the previous administration, you had essentially 4 camps. One that was very pro-Ukraine. That was Secretary of Defense General Lloyd Austin. That was Rear Admiral Kirby, and to a lesser degree, Blinken. It was like 50-50. You have another group that was like, wow, we should try and slow walk this stuff because it's, Biden's fucking polls tanked after Afghanistan, rightly so. I mean, it was like the lowest ever. And he got a hell of a bump with regards to Ukraine. This is pulling real well. Let's see if we can limp this along to the midterms. You had another group that was like, yeah, we have to be careful about how we disperse, equipment because they're concerned about escalatory war, which I understand, and that's a valid concern. That said, the greater risk is not punching the bully in the face, particularly at the time. I'll get why that changes from then to now. And finally, you had another group that was like, yep, they didn't want to piss off Putin because they were, again, very much committed in seeing the rehashing of the JCPOA Iran deal. So that's Sullivan, that's William Burr, that's Kerry when he was there. And they openly said, I actually posted, I posted in your group because people were saying, what do you mean? Well, this is right from the Voice of America, which is the official mouthpiece of the United States government, of the Biden administration in early 2022 begging Putin not to stymie the JCPOA Iran deal and then carving out $10 billion of waivers of the sanctions we rightly applied to Vladimir Putin for Rosatom to sell 2 light water reactors to Iran. Here's the stuff right from the Treasury Department's website, exactly what those exemptions are. I'll send it to you. So
why was he doing that, and where was Mike Pompeo during all of this? What was his position?
This is during Biden. This is not now. This is Biden's administration's doing that.
Right.
Because you had Obama retreads that wanted to see the rehash of the JCPOA Iran deal. Putin was the main intermediary between the United States and the Mullah regime. And why are they invested in that? Because they were getting kickbacks from fucking backdoor oil, like from no-show jobs in response to facilitating that cockamamie idea. If you want evidence of that, just see what happened when Kerry got busted being a unregistered agent of influence for the Mullah regime and violating the Logan's Act under President Trump's first term. I'll send you that too.
Yeah,
I'll send you links to all this stuff.
But so
Donald, go ahead.
I still want to know what Mike Pompeo's position was regarding
Ukraine. Biden?
No, at any time. What Mike Pompeo? I'm just interested to know what Mike Pompeo's
So,
position on Ukraine is.
to the best of my knowledge, and I haven't looked at where it is now, it's one of support. From the best of my knowledge, it was one of support.
Yeah,
Although you have to be, that support has to be done in a very specific way, because who are we facing off? One of the most lethal, dangerous autocratic regimes in the world that has one of the, well, the world's largest nuclear stockpile. I mean, that's the reason why we're kind of like, hesitant. Sure. So here comes, so these things kind of go on. The previous administration started slow walking support. I was talking to Andy Fute. That's one of the people that talks directly to. He was the president, the national president of UKK. He's a good guy. He was at Dnipro in September of 2023. He's like, why the hell is Sullivan slow walking? And I was like, Andy, and I went through the list of like these are the four camps and all that. I mean, I can send you the email. I have to block out his email address because it's not proper for me to share his contact information. At least you can see this is what I said at the time that I said it to the person that I'm talking about. What happened? So the initial foot dragging of critical material support by the previous administration, along with the operational constraints that Biden placed on Ukrainian defense forces, undermined their ability to maximize the returns they could in applying the Western military doctrine they were trained in, which is one of mobility, speed, and rapid victory. And what that did is it constrained some of the early successes Ukraine could have, and they were able to do so in no insignificant manner to the courage of Zelensky and the gallantry of Ukrainian forces on the ground. Right? It was their
right,
bravery that won that victory.
right.
That said, the victories weren't maximized because of because Biden slow walked the support and because of the operational constraints. So what happened? It meant that the operational environment translated from a war of mobility and speed to one of mass and attrition, which does not select for Ukraine. You would have to have, I think it was like Peter Zeihan did this. He said he actually put this analysis out about 2 years ago, and he was right. I mean, he's about 70% right on stuff, at least to the best of my understanding,
Yeah.
observation. You would have to have 10 Kearsons to equal out the disparity in population or latent power between Ukraine and Russia. 10 of those massive victories just to even the playing field. That's why you can't have a war of attrition. Tragically, the previous administration, slow walking a lot of that support, turned a war of speed and intensity to one of mass and attrition. And now that's put us in the position we're at now, which is this is why, like Donald, and he was initially in the meeting between President Zelensky and Donald. You see, Donald was actually very accommodating to him up until about 3/4 of the way in. Why is it that it wasn't Zelensky's fault?
Right.
You had the bipartisan meeting prior to the meeting between President Zelensky and President Trump, right? That was with Lindsey Graham, and Lindsey Graham was very clear about how President Zelensky should approach Donald, right? Be thankful, be humble. And what happened? What did Donald say? Like he was talking about, we're going to have U.S. investment that's going to sit there and rebuild Ukrainian industry. It's going to rebuild their economy. It'll give them funding streams to modernize their military. We might even have U.S. troops on ground. He fucking said that. You'll have like French and British forces, like peacekeeping forces there. So 15 minutes prior to Zelensky having to meet President Trump, two Never Trumpers got a hold of Zelensky. It was Senator Schumer and who's the guy, the Never Trumper DNC senator out of Connecticut. And they're like, don't sign the mineral deal. It's like economic colonialism. Fuck. So Zelensky's misled by Never Trumpers under the false notion that the mineral deal is somehow the United States stealing like Ukrainian resources. That's not what we're doing.
And the press went nuts over it. The press went nuts over it.
Well, right. I mean, you've seen what the U.S. and Ukraine's ambassador to Ukraine did when it blew up. She just put her hand in her head. It's that bad, right?
Yeah.
That wasn't Zelensky's fault. That was two Never Trumpers that co-opted Zelensky's efforts to express to the president why it is we need to, why Ukraine's so important, right? It wasn't Zelensky. That's why I said these Never Trumpers get me so friggin' angry, right? They hate Donald more than they love Ukraine. Their hatred of Donald is not underwritten by true like love of Ukraine or any kind of the vast majority of them of objective analysis on these policies are bad. It's performative allyship that co-opts the misery that Ukraine is suffering and the gallantry of Ukrainian defense forces to Ukraine wash their partisan never Trump or orange man bad bullshit. And that it not only polarizes our country, it dilutes U.S. national will regarding supporting our allies, and it puts our allies and because of the chance of escalatory war, the world in jeopardy. So you have this fiasco. Everybody, me included, are like, wow, that was really bad. That ended bad. Like, all you had to do was sign the deal, dude. You would have had, well, why is the deal good for Ukraine and the United States? Because right now, Ukraine allowing us to develop the rare earth elements in Ukraine allows the United States an alternative to the 90+% of the rare earth elements you need for things like producing advanced microprocessors, advanced weapon systems, the rest that have been gobbled up by the Chinese Communist Party for the past 23 years while we were involved in the global war on terror. For instance, when Biden recklessly disengaged from Afghanistan, what he conceded to the Chinese Communist Party and all the other, pick any other hostile actors that are, that have varying levels of organizational, operational, overlap and ties. In 2011, the United States Geological Service discovered about 10 million tons of economically recoverable rare earth elements in northern Afghanistan. We would develop those, and that's, it helps us, it helps them. Well, because we recklessly disengaged, now China sits there and has that. We don't have that source
to that. Yeah, they moved in immediately.
Or at least they denied our ability to help develop it for the benefit of both Afghanistan and the United States. Regardless, in any modern economy or conflict, you are going to be very much dependent upon certain critical raw inputs, in this case, rare earth elements. So rare earth elements allows the United States to do things like what? Build out our long-range strike munitions so that we can better support Ukraine. Ukraine gets a lot of money. We sit there and can underwrite. It'll help underwrite our race towards strong AI, which is the number one race of something I wrote to the CIA back in 2010. I'll send you that redacted. Warning about, the Chinese Communist Party's, threat to U.S. competitiveness and what kind of things we need to focus on, one of which was the number one was strong AI. So you had these never-Trumpers mislead Zelensky 15 minutes prior to he had to meet President. Zelensky now is operating under this manufactured misconception by two never-Trumpers. Don't sign the deal. They're trying to steal all your stuff. So Zelensky is understandably somewhat hesitant, right? And so Donald's like, I'm being as nice as I can be here, right? I mean, I'm telling you, you're going to have U.S. troops, potentially U.S. troops on the ground. And that's something that's not Donald's, default position, right? That was I was like, dude, you should just take that and run. Because he was misled, you had some pushback, and it got to a point where it devolved into what it did. So that's there. As far as, the operational realities on the ground, because Ukrainian defense forces, as gallant as they are, as brave as they are, as noble as their mission is, the previous administration's slow walk support for so long that now it exacerbated attrition for Ukrainian defense forces, albeit it's not the same as Russia. I mean, Russia has been hammered. I'm going to get to that, why, he says both Russian and Ukraine. That it would be hard-pressed for Ukraine to effectively wage a war mobilization without a World War II Lend-Lease level style of military support, and even then you have to have the personnel to use it, and you have to train the people to be able to use it. Right? You have to train them. It takes a while. Like if you're using aircraft, think 9 months. If you're talking about M1 Abrams, so beginning when we were trying to find heavy armor, I was one that was very pro get them MBT 60A3s out of Egypt, which is about 27. You'll see all the stuff I sourced. Why that and not M1 Abrams? Because the training, the learning curve is easier, and the logistics chain is the same. It uses diesel. It has the same kind of drive.
It's easier to fix.
Well, plus it's easier to drive. It uses lanyards, right? Whereas driving a M1 Abrams like a car. That doesn't mean it's not. I'm just using it as how these things are different. You're trying to leverage skill sets that Ukrainian defenders already had, so that it eases the transition. You can get things in the field quicker. They didn't do that. So here we are, right? A lot of that is underwriting why, at least to the well, before I do that, I should kind of like outline some of the camps as the best I see in the current administration. Just like the previous administration, no administration is a homogenized block. You have different types of people with different worldviews and different views on things. And I mean, like presidents always do that. They want to have people give, like, they're looking at people kind of debate in front of them so they can hopefully come up with a better policy, right? So, like, that's if they're all honest brokers, which, quite often, tragically, they're not. You have a camp that's very pro-Ukraine. That's now again President Trump. That's Secretary of State Rubio. That's National Security Advisor Waltz. That's to a degree. Well, Pete Hegseth's in the second group, and that's Secretary of Commerce. You have a group that's supportive of Ukraine that said they are focusing on pivoting to things like the Middle East and the Far East because, and I'll get to that in a second. How do we have to prioritize our defenses? So they're trying to get like Europe, you got to step up your funding because we no longer live in a U.S. unipolar moment. We now live in an asymmetric multipolar environment, which is hateful for me as a neocon to say. We fought, suffered, lectured why that isn't a desirable end state. Tragically, a lot of people who undermined our efforts in the war on terror were able to sit there and turn a war of speed and intensity that it was correctly envisioned under W into one of mass and attrition and exacerbated deconcentration of power, international system, in part resulting in what we have today. We cannot cover all bets. So they're like, Europe, you have to step up your game. We're getting ready to hit the Mullah regime. The Chi-Coms are getting ready to hit Taiwan. We can't cover all bets anymore. We're in the process of upgrading our national defense industrial base and our force projection capability back to a 2 and now a 3+ MTW. Right? I mean, Clinton drew it down to a 1-1-1 policy, and we were drawn into the global war on terror and all this other stuff. So that's like Pete Hegseth. He's one of those. Right? Pete's not a friggin' Pete's a good guy. You may or may not disagree. You may or may not agree with some of the positions he takes. He wants to do a good job, and he's not some non-interventionist. In a lot of ways, he calls himself a recovering neocon. Then you have a group that is very much opposed to Ukraine. So that's Tulsi Gabbard. That's Witkoff. In the broader kitchen cabinet, that's people like Tucker Carlson.
Yeah.
Colonel McGregor, who right. While I very much observe, appreciate, and respect the soldiers Tulsi and Lieutenant Colonel Gregor once were. Like, I very much respect the hero of 73 Eastings in the first Gulf War. I just don't believe Colonel McGregor respects the soldier he once was, because he's been parroting any number of propagandist narratives from our adversaries, from Putin to Xi to anybody else from like 2006, increasingly from 2006 till now. And you have Bannon. Bannon's smart guy, Bill Red, very much, he's right about having to onsource manufacturing from China. China is the number one threat when you think about within the actors that comprise the what I call the autocratic bloc, which is Putin's criminalized counterintelligence state, the Chinese Communist Party, their rogue regime proxies. So that was the Mullah regime that legally occupies Iran, North Korean regime, previously the Alawite regime, and all their sub-state transnational proxies. Hamas, Hezbollah, shake a stick, you'll hit one. I mean, it'd take me forever to go through them all. Right. That said, Bannon's ideas, though, on how you onsource, you're not going to put people to work on a line. That's insane. I mean, I did one of the white papers for Rubio's Made in China 2025 report back in 2015. I'll send that to you. I was not the only one. I was one of the main ones. Right? You're going to use advanced automation and AI. Well, what's Bannon's idea regarding foreign policy? He's like, just walk away from Ukraine. He's so done. What the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, why? I don't.
Ukraine, Putin's not going to stop. Why is Bannon like what? At least to one of the underlying maybe motives of it, or at least how it's sold. So, as you know, the strategic doctrine of Putin's criminalized counterintelligence state centers on something called hybrid warfare. So hybrid warfare is very much like the Russian version of what the Chinese Communist Party called unrestricted warfare back in 1999. It very much focuses on things other than direct conventional and strategic military conflict because, including now, they're at a disadvantage when they come and fight against the United States, right? One on one will stomp you. So what did they do? They came up with certain kind of counters, like gray zone conflict, industrial warfare, cyber attacks, political strategic information influence operations, amplification of divisions in the target nation, in this case the United States, to politically polarize the United States, all of that stuff. So Putin very much underwrote, is one of the main underwriters of a lot of the radical left. For instance, the number one funder for anti-fracking movements in the United States for the past 20 years, Putin's criminalized counterintelligence state.
Oh, that's
And
interesting.
then, yeah, absolutely. I'll send you the report by the Congressional and Senate Intelligence Committees, respectively. Then Putin presents himself as the solution to the problem he caused, right? He is just trying to sit there and defend the world from all of this crazy stuff, this decadence of the West. Dickhead, you're the one that created it. Right? And so some people who don't have the time to do all the kinds of research that either you or I or other people do, it's not their fault. I mean, they're trying to make ends meet, right?
Right.
They don't have time. Some of them, they kind of like, that sounds, what they do see is they see like radical leftists saying things like firebombing. Think of like Black Lives Matter riots and Antifa and like shit going on in our education system where they're having like transgender people. I'm part of the LGBT community. I very much disagree with gay marriage. That's a whole nother discussion. I'm more than willing to talk about that. And while like members of the alternatively oriented community deserve equal rights, the left co-opted the need for equal rights and weaponized the challenges that demographic that me and my mom in part belong to, and as a way to weaponize that demographic against their political opposition. So what is the opposite side? Like guys on our side say, they go, "What the fuck, man? They got like drag queens reading fucking books to kids in kindergarten. What the hell's going on?" So they're like in extreme crisis. Like, holy shit, I can't even. I'm not even safe in my own home. So
Right.
Putin presents himself as a solution that becomes really attractive, doesn't it? People are willing to take the hand of the devil if they're starving and offering them bread. And while
Okay.
that's something, go ahead.
Yeah. So
I know I'm like quick, fast, and dirty. I'm bouncing a lot. I'm
n-
trying to give you as much as I can.
yeah, no, it's okay. We don't want to get way off into the
The weeds.
weeds. But okay, so my question is that if Trump knows more than we think that he does, and as you have described the timeline of how he did support Ukraine, why come out and say some of the stuff that you say to make yourself look like you have no clue what's going on? Does he do these things okay? Why does he do it? Why does he
Maybe
do it?
to try and get the other side, like Putin, to buy into a deal as part and parcel of the broader strategy that kind of underwrites this administration, at least to the best of my understanding of it.
Why send Witkoff in to negotiate if
Not a fan of Wickoff.
he's so against Ukraine? I mean,
Yeah.
there's just so much criticism that is going on, and even with people who we work with and that we know that work on a very high level. They're very impressive people.
Yeah.
I won't name names, but we've got some extremely, you being one of them, Jeff, very impressive people in our network. Okay,
There
and
are people that are far more.
we do have the ability. We do have the ability to uh, get messages to the president or to the cabinet, or sway the opinion a little bit. um it's just even some of those people are convinced that, one, Trump is clueless, and so he's going to enter into a strategy of containment and appeasement. Okay, and we're going to kick this can down the road, and when he's out of office, because he doesn't care, he doesn't care, and so we're going to kick this can down the road, and it's going to happen again. So
That's true. That's probably true.
uh, is it
I mean,
probably
the idea that containment, there is no off ramp for Vladimir Putin. So why is
right?
Donald? So first, what kind of defines the approach this administration has adopted, at least to the best of my understanding as I see it? It centers around four main lines of effort: freezing the conflict to buy time to rearm, pushing NATO to start bumping up its expenditure and carrying its weight, avoiding a premature offensive that would collapse Ukraine's center, which is why things like Vice President Vance during when the meeting between President Zelensky and President Trump developed, he said, "Are you telling me you're not having a hard time, recruiting?" There's a reason he said that. Now I understand why President Zelensky didn't like that because Vice President Vance is expressing a vulnerability that clearly the opposition, like Putin's criminalized counterintelligence, is going to use to fine tune what they're doing. And then
Right.
it's strategically starving Putin's war machine via drumming up production of oil and natural gas while prepping the West for a long-term confrontation against the autocratic bloc. That's the four kind of lines of effort. There is the other issue is, again, we live in an asymmetric multipolar world. There are two other conflicts that are coming online. We cannot cover all bets. It boils at this point, if he sans those four lines of effort due to the operational realities that in many ways was caused by the previous administration's slow walking support and the operational constraints they placed on gallant Ukrainian defenders. If you want to push Putin out of Ukraine and very decisively obtain the victory that Ukrainians deserve to obtain, and as I kind of outlined when I started helping them in the very beginning of the context of this conflict, Zelensky's democratic-elected government stays in power. Putin is, Ukraine liberates all of its territory to its 1991 borders. It's done with the least amount of U.S. and Ukrainian blood and treasure, and it minimizes the chance for escalatory war. You would have to have a intervention almost assuredly with Western NATO forces. Even without the United States, if Western NATO forces did like a massive bolt from the blue kind of like shock and awe campaign against Putin's forces, they would just literally, I don't want to cuss on your show, they would just maul. Like Putin's forces would get obliterated.
Good.
So here's true. What's the response? Almost assuredly now Putin is going to use nuclear weapons.
Okay, I have always said that. I have said that, and I'm not a military. I haven't been in the military, but I have always said that. Yes, he will use one, whether it be.
So why? Putin, there is no off ramp for him. You're right. People who say things like he's not going to stop. Yeah, he can't afford to stop now, right?
Right.
Ukraine has so mauled, and thankfully so, mauled Putin's thugs that have invaded Ukraine. I mean, you've had almost 1 million casualties. That's like 20 times what the Soviets lost in the Afghan Civil War in 1/3 the time. Right? So if he stops, the ultra nationalists in his country are going to kill him. If he doesn't stop, the ones that Putin is consistently pissed off is going to kill him. Right? So that's like members in the Far East that Putin's criminalized counterintelligence state is committing 2 acts of genocide coterminously. One is against Ukrainians, Ukrainian people, and the other one is against undesirable elements within Russia, specifically non-white Russians from Central and Eastern Russia. So that's Uzbeks, Turkmens, Muslims.
Muslims,
Right.
yeah.
Absolutely. Putin has disproportionately mobilized them. Me and my buddies who did like the demographic analysis in the beginning part of this war actually looked at that, and we were like, that's a wedge issue. And so some of that was actually capitalized on. You see some uprisings. You remember the uprising in the southern, I don't know what they call it. It's not an oblast, like their version of a state. Forgive me again. It's been a long week. And what happened? You had all the women and children that were there because Putin had mobilized most of the men, were like begging their men to come back home from the front.
Mm-hmm.
Putin sent his FSB and SVR agents there and butchered them all.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So when you think about the use of nuclear weapons, which is very much in keeping with Putin's criminalized counterintelligence stated doctrine of de-escalation, actually it's escalation and win, which is introduce tactical nuclear weapons in a mainland conflict in Europe because they've assessed, they being Putin's criminalized counterintelligence, assessed that Western European NATO nations do not have the will to respond. So Prigozhin does his coup. Prigozhin was a very evil guy.
Yeah.
He wasn't a good guy. He's kind of like the lesser, shittier version of, say, Rommel and Stauffenberg when they did Operation Valkyrie. Even Prigozhin understood that Putin's like crazy ass gambit of recreating the Soviet Union under a fascist economic model was probably going to destroy Russia, and it was destroying Russia, and it has indeed. I'll get to that too. Destroyed Russia, and maybe the world, because it would lead to an escalatory war. So Prigozhin is like he's had it. He's had it with Shoigu. He's had it with everybody else. They're all these corrupt assholes. Prigozhin initiates his attempt at a coup. He starts marching on Moscow. Putin had his intelligence forces kidnap Prigozhin's daughter, had her right on camera, and said, if you take another step, she's going to get raped and murdered right on camera. Prigozhin stops. So as Prigozhin was doing his march, he went by a very particular base where Putin's forces had four.
Here you go.
So Prigozhin is doing his coup. We're back. Thanks. Sorry for the pause for technical difficulties. Prigozhin is trying. He does his coup. He's implementing his coup. He goes by a base where Putin had four base tactical nuclear weapons. Oh. Prigozhin called the CIA to let us know he has no intention of going into that base or hijacking those nuclear weapons. Right? Even he understood the nature of this conflict and where nuclear weapons are the role they play. Right now, it's true. Like when you take like people like Ryan McBeth, he's a good guy. He does a lot of assessments. Like, well, nuclear weapons, you have to exploit them. Sure, still, it's part of Russian strategic doctrine. If you introduce nuclear weapons, even tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine, our response was, well. So General Lloyd Austin's response at the fall of 2022, after the Kherson counteroffensive and Ukraine really stomped Putin into the ground, we were very happy about it. There was intelligence said there was an over 50% chance that Putin was going to use tactical weapons in response. So General Lloyd Austin calls his opposite number on the deconfliction line and says, it looks like you're going to do that. If you do that, our response will be strategic. I think he said existential, which means we're going to bathe you in nuclear fire. Biden then comes on, calls Putin, and cuts General Lloyd Austin's legs right off underneath him. So, right, that then is sending these mixed signals to Putin. Maybe he can use it, maybe he can't. You don't know. So Prigozhin does his march, stops. He's doing the call to CIA. What's the point? The point is, even non-U.S., if all of NATO, even sans the United States, was to engage Putin's forces in Ukraine, like directly, decisively, they would obliterate Putin's forces. They'd obliterate them. Putin would result in nuclear weapons. Why? If he loses, he's done. So he goes down the S curve of prospect theory from being risk averse to risk accepting because he has nothing left to lose. Which is exactly why when these discussions happen at the point that it is right now, if you want to see victory in the decisive manner that, given the fact patterns on the ground, the previous administration undermined Ukrainian efforts, it exacerbated attrition, which now means that, Ukraine is going to have a harder time towards even leveraging a war mobility to realize the victory that they deserve to realize, defined as Zelensky stays in power, they liberate all of their territory to 1991 borders, it's done with the least amount of Ukrainian U.S. blood and treasure, which, because of the previous administration, that ship's already sailed. And it minimizes the risk of escalatory war. Putin will respond with nukes, which means it'll ultimately escalate to a nuclear exchange.
It's going to escalate.
To the previous administration, there's a good chance we should initiate a preemptive nuclear strike against the autocratic bloc.
Oh my God.
When I did that assessment, the worst case assessment of the best case scenario, and I'll send those like that assessment to you, would mean this is if everything went swimmingly well for us, which it probably won't. I mean, we'll definitely come out better. We lose between 7 and 14 million people. The top 10 cities in America get vaporized. 4 of our major military bases get hit. You'd see a GDP reduction of about 25%. We could recover probably within 15 years. Total loss of life in the world, maybe between 2.5 and 3 billion people, because you'd have to hit Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. You're not going to just hit one and then leave. Like China would love to have the United States and Russia hit each other with nukes because that would leave them the only person in power, right? That's called bait and bleed or bloodletting. Well, that's bait and bleed. You use two adversaries or a frenemy and an adversary to kill each other, then you're the one that comes out unscathed. Mm-hmm. Right? So you're going to have to hit everybody. Mm-hmm. That's like the reason Donald said you're gambling now with World War III.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't the frustration wasn't with Zelensky. It was with the fact that Donald has yet again been placed in a position where he has to clean up the mess of the previous friggin' administration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
First term, Donald had to clean up Obama's mess when he didn't sit there and uphold the Budapest Memorandum and up-armed Ukraine the way he should have. And now he's like, shit, we have to do this again, except for it's like, 2014 times 20.
It's very serious. Okay, so let's redirect a little bit because we're talking about nukes and whatnot. Okay, we know that there is for lack of a better word, massive buildup in Belarus of Russian stuff. Okay, I mean there is everything, from underground bunkers, hardened.
Putin has 4 base nuclear weapons in Belarus. That's
He's
true.
got nukes in Belarus pointed at Poland, is my understanding. There are millions and millions of gas and fuel sitting in trucks on the road. It looks like they could invade any time. They could invade Poland at any time. Are
If
they gonna
Russia
are
tried to
they gonna
invade
do it?
Poland,
Are they gonna do it? That
so no intel analyst, and I'm training intelligence. It's one of my my academic training part deals with that. No intel analyst would ever say with absolute certainty this is 100% going to happen. If somebody
okay.
says that to you, they're either trying to sell you something or they're not a very good analyst. We do speak in things like probability, right?
Yes,
So
no, it was probability. These guys are awesome. I'll tell you who they are later. And but yeah, it's a high probability. How can
inevitably, because Putin, it's not just Putin, Putin plus his 134 other KGB extremist whack jobs out of St. Petersburg who have been pining to recreate the Soviet Union ever since the Soviet Union collapsed, right? They initially tried first they tried to take down, Putin was peripherally involved in the coup that was up against some of the reformers in the later part of the Soviet Union. That failed. Then he was part of some of the people that tried to go after Yeltsin. That failed. And so they're like, well, trying to recreate the Soviet Union directly isn't a good idea. So they're going to take an incrementalist approach, right? That's what they're doing, right? This is the latter stages of that. So, yeah, I mean, there's a very high degree of probability. This was actually just, this was declassed by German intelligence and the forgive me, the Bundeswehr. I have a hard time saying that one. Just like 2 days ago, that there is a very high degree of probability. Well, now Putin has completely transformed his economy to a wartime economy. He has built up his national defense industrial base to the best he can to fight a very massive campaign against NATO.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So this is coming no matter what. The probability that there's going to be an engagement between Putin and NATO it's very high.
So, is that going to be August or
They said no later than 2029. At least that's what German intelligence said 2 days ago.
I just wonder if it's gonna take that long. And
latest is 2029 is what they said.
Yeah.
So that means from now to right, just like between us and the Mullah regime is probably within the next 60 days. War between us and the Chinese Communist Party is no later than 2027.
Oh, it's frightening.
All of these different things are kicking off all at once.
Yeah, it's frightening. Well,
in the beginning part of this, go ahead.
Yeah, well, and the look on Trump's face, it's my, your heart breaks for him because I just can't even imagine the pressure. And I feel the same way, about Zelensky. I
love Zelensky.
I love the man. That's the word I use. I love him. I think he's a incredible leader. He's talented. He's creative. The Ukrainian people are brilliant. I mean, the Ukrainian people are brilliant, and what they have done is no less than a miracle. And I feel sorry for people, Jeff, who are not watching this war because my father was a corpsman in World War II. Okay, he went to 2 theaters. And he was a corpsman, and so I love weapons. I just love watching the weapons. I love hearing people analyze it and talk about it. The
military technology has an air of sexiness to it.
The battlefield, yeah, it's sexy, right? The battlefield, what is happening on the battlefield right now is just so amazing. And when I hear
Ukraine's ability to innovate on the fly is outside of the fact that Zelensky is a modern day Leonidas and Kyiv is the contemporary, form of Thermopylae. Like Ukrainians are unbelievably innovative.
Oh my God, they're so smart.
I'm going to touch on those two. Those are two very important issues that I tried to share with some of the members of the local Ukrainian diaspora, many of which the people, the general Americans of Ukrainian descent, I love them. There's certain elements of corruption within that diaspora, though, that I've really had a hard time with. I mean, it's been that's a whole nother story. So, and that doesn't mean we shouldn't support our allies. It means that that's a challenge that has to be addressed, so that the just like when Senator Rubio said regarding USAID, it's not that we don't want to help people. It's that 90 cents on the dollar, only 10 cents on the dollar gets to the intended recipient, right? 90 cents goes to people's like friggin' job in DC. Well, that's not what we donated the money for. It's to help start people in Africa or help our Ukrainian allies or whoever.
I did an investigation, open source intelligence investigation for a sophisticated organization that's been around for 30 years. And I got picked and lucky to do it. And the investigation was into the Students for Justice in Palestine and that whole
it's direct descendant of the Holy Land Foundation. It's directly to Hamas.
That whole network. And I'm working in Maltego, and I've got this other stuff, and I've got my nodes going, and I'm connecting.
You stop similar ground. It's amazing we don't know.
Well, guess who?
Yeah.
Guess who pops up in every single node? USAID. They pop, and I'm going, oh my God. Well, this was before they were really on my radar, and I'm looking at my my crime wall, and USAID is on the crime wall at every node, and it's just
radical leftists, right, are using it to sit there and aid wash their.
Oh, and it just gets dirtier and dirtier and dirtier. It's just incredible what people do. And my husband and I talk a lot about just the level of crime, and we're looking at the world and we're just going, oh my God, this has got to be like what the Bible talks about, the 1,000 years of rule by Satan. I mean, we must be.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure even the devil's like, holy shit. Even he's been put out of a job by these guys.
Oh, the aliens don't want to come and help us either. I mean, they're just going to go right on by.
Well, no, don't make eye contact. Go right by, right? I totally get it.
I mean, it's nuts. It's nuts what's going on. And to watch Putin come out, and to see everybody says, oh, he's going to save us from the evil gay people, and he's going to do
order and all that.
Oh, it just, what people fall for is just incredible. Just the stuff that, it's just, and there's so much.
Alex Jones did that shit.
What?
He was an asshole. Alex Jones was pushing all that dumb shit in the beginning.
Oh, I know.
The globalists and the neocons are tied to the reptilicons.
Yeah, we'll have a conversation off camera about that. But
very important though.
What?
You brought up two very important issues. One was issue fatigue, right? Why don't people know? I warned.
Yes.
Warned members of the local Ukrainian diaspora and other people that talk to other people overseas. Understand something. Right now, like Putin has just invaded. People are extremely pissed off. You have like 90 days where you're going to have a max amount of buy-in. That stretched out to 3 years. At this point, it's a product of, just human beings are very adaptable, and we're emotionally, it's part of our emotional adaptability. We just kind of get acclimated to things, right? And so that sometimes translates into, okay, we're talking about this again. I mean, this has been here for 3 years. I got other things to go on. That issue fatigue sets in. And so what I told those guys is they should have set up their Track 2 material support funding strategy in such a manner where they could create self-sustaining nodes, financially self-sustaining nodes that then could provide the material support indefinitely, independent of national political policy, environmental cycles, issue fatigue. They didn't care. Some of the people that were there are so corrupt, they stole hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, I can go on and on.
Okay, so I want to say two things. Okay,
yeah.
And okay,
not Zelensky. Zelensky's not the corrupt guy.
Well,
it's not the guys on the ground.
The first thing that I want to say is, there's a process between point A and point B. You
Sure.
can't just go to the goal line.
Right.
It's like just, you're building a house and you just go ahead and put the roof on and there's no structure underneath.
Yeah.
The second
They
thing that I
know.
want to say,
I try to teach you.
the
Sorry.
the second thing that I want to say is in regards to Steve Bannon. This is what I think happened. When they came out and they were anti-Ukraine and nasty about it. And I really think Lara Logan was the first person. And
Was she?
yeah, I do. She was the first person that I saw tweet about it. And then Bannon picked it up and it went nuts from there. I don't think that they thought this war was going to last. And they thought that they could say these nasty things and then it would go away, right? They also don't know or didn't know about the open source intelligence that was going to blindside them, and that people like us have access to tools. We can find out pretty much anything about anybody now, and we can find out anything and we can get to the truth. So I'm sorry, Steve Bannon and people like you. You can't lie to us anymore because we're going to get the truth and we're going to find out about it. So they got pushed into a corner and they couldn't dig their way out. So they had to, here comes Tucker Carlson. He's going to find something that they can sink their teeth into to continue the narrative. And it was
Tucker's the reason why Mike Pompeo, he's the main reason, one of the main reasons why Mike Pompeo didn't get picked for DNI this time around.
Yeah, I believe that.
He's the one that convinced the powers of being Donald.
Okay.
Tulsi over Mike Pompeo.
Okay, so this is scary. Okay, this is why we say that Trump is not, there's gaps in his knowledge base. And he doesn't really understand and know all about the Russian aggression. And how could he be
does. It's just also a human being though, right?
But how could he be so how can anybody look at what Russia is doing and just try to appease that and go along with it? I mean, the battlefield, the war in the battlefield is beyond obscene, right? What they're doing. And we could list it off: the murder, the rape, the torture, what the Russians.
Putin is the butcher of Bucha.
Okay, right? He's the butcher. He's the butcher. That's the other thing with the open source intelligence. I don't think Putin and them understood that everybody in Ukraine was going to have one of these, and they were going to be filming it. Okay. And then they were, and the young people in Ukraine, they were ready for that. After Zelensky signed into law the ability for Ukrainians to arm themselves, those kids over there, they started really getting it together. They were getting ready. They knew it was going to happen. So when Lavrov comes out and said, "Oh, the Ukrainians are bombing their own people, and it was Ukrainian tanks in Bucha," we weren't even there. And
they got carpet
okay, so you know who blabbed? So the first person that blabbed were the Chechens. Ramzan comes out and they're blabbing about the cleanup. They're being the cleanup crew in Ramzan
or Kadyrov.
Ramzan Kadyrov.
Yeah.
Ramzan Kadyrov. So they blabbed, right? They blabbed about it, and then all of a sudden it all came out. I don't think Shoigu, Lavrov, and all these guys, they think they can just come out and say whatever they want. And that's the only information that's out in the ecosystem now. It's what I'm saying is open source intelligence has blindsided everybody. And it's been awesome to watch.
So Putin's criminal, I did a report, one of the last papers I did in 2015 for IWP for the postgrad the postgrad stuff I was pursuing, was on the evolution of strategic information influence operation from Soviet active measures to Russian strategic information influence operations. And so there's a lot of truth to what you're saying about the operational impact of advancements of transportation technology, which minimize what sometimes is called the transaction cost of information. This is also part of a broader kind of socioeconomic and technological operational environment that deals with all kinds of how threats proliferate and all this other stuff. And it tightens the disinformation cycle, what one might call that. Sure, you like observe, you tailor you can do your assessment on it's almost like marketing. You do an adversary or an actor sits there and does an analysis on their target demographic. They find out what like their preferences are and all of that. They tailor then the message to that particular demographic. Now it's designed to almost to a person. So Sergei Tretyakov, who was one of the leading defectors from Russian intelligence post-Soviet era, actually wrote about this or talked about this in Comrade J, right, on the evolution of Russian disinformation. You're right. That technology enables everybody.
Yeah.
So Russian disinformation switched not to just get you to choose a choice they want you to choose. Now it's switched partly just to paralyze action. You get hit with so many different narratives. You have no idea to analyze anything. Like, I'm frustrated. I just got to go. I'm going to get dinner with my wife. I don't want to watch it anymore. So
Yeah.
in paralyzing action, it almost is kind of like from a national will perspective, which is defined as support of policy, peace, and wartime. It's like a functional kill.
Yeah. Well, they know
to help you. You also didn't get them. It undermines their ability to concentrate their efforts to support your opponent.
Right.
So you're right. You're right. That's like part of the story. There's the other side, though. Do not underestimate Putin's criminalized counterintelligence's ability to use influence operations. They are very, very good at it.
Oh, I think they're the best at it.
That Ukrainians were as innovative and as quick as they were and as adaptive as they were. They weren't expecting that shit. Nobody was. Like, that's like incredible. They're like, holy shit.
It's created a lot of drama, and we're watching it all play out. I mean, the riffs and the fighting and the drama that's going on. What got me onto the war was just Ramzan. I discovered Ramzan, Kadyrov. Probably
he's a vile guy.
Oh my God, 2 or 3 months before the invasion. And I actually started writing about him because, the Chechens are just interesting. There's a lot of them that come out of the Fight Club in Dagestan and they go into the MMA,
sure,
and so they're, I like,
so part of the Tajikistanis don't like each other. You saw how that was starting to kick off, right?
I love watching the Chechens fight, and then all of a sudden the invasion happened and so I was watching Ramzan's Telegram page on a daily basis, and I'm thinking, wow, this is really, really interesting, and we're going to have Muslims fighting Muslims here pretty soon, in Ukraine,
They already have that. They already had there's elements of anti-mullah elements of the Persian diaspora were assisting Ukrainians back in the early 2022, early 2023.
Yeah.
A lot of Ukraine has been a focal point that's drawn in a lot of different elements between the United States-led Western Alliance and the autocratic bloc. You can see that.
Yeah.
Right? Whether it's GWAT veterans that went there because they're like, this is super shitty, and I'm not going to stand idly by if I have these skill sets and watch these killing women and children and kidnapping people and all the other crazy, vile crap that Putin's people have done.
Yeah.
Putin is also drawn on things like terrorist elements in Central Africa and people out of Syria, North Koreans. Everybody kind of can if you just do a cursory preview of the news, you'll see the things that Putin is drawn on. So there's a couple of things here. One, because you talked about a couple of things. One is the demography of this conflict. Why is it that Donald says, there's people dying on both sides? It's not because, at least to the best of my understanding, it's not because Donald is saying that there's a moral equivalency between Putin's criminalized counterintelligence state, illegal war of aggression in Ukraine, and Ukrainians' gallant resistance of that illegal.
It sounds like he's making it like that.
So here's the other thing. Here's one of the other concerns post-conflict. Putin does have to lose.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And he, in many ways, already has.
Right.
Even if he took over all of Ukraine, which he won't, not without, he's already lost. What do I mean? So as it stands prior to this administration, one of my colleagues and dearest friends helped do the demographic analysis in the early part of 2022 and shared it with some of the people in the local Ukrainian diaspora. White Russians, which is the one Putin cares about, that's the power base in Russia, right? That's like, people in St. Petersburg, Moscow, right? Slavic Russians. Their birth rate hasn't been a replacement birth rate for decades.
Oh, decades. Wow. Okay.
Right. So so Russia hasn't had a replacement birth rate for a while. Like if you unpack the black ball that is Russia as a national political body, and it's comprised of different people, which it is, you have certain elements that have a very high birth rate. So it's like Tajikistanis, Uzbeks, Muslims.
The Muslims.
Right. So that's one of the reasons why Putin is disproportionately mobilizing, because he's using his illegal war of aggression in Ukraine to also commit a genocide against undesirable elements in Russia by forcing them to be bullet sponges for Ukrainian machine guns, right? So Putin's crazy sick head. He's like, he gets two benefits. One, he gets to drain Ukrainians out of martial fervor and ammunition, and he gets to use Ukrainian machine guns to kill people he doesn't like in Russia.
Mm-hmm.
So he had this upstart. So keeping the differences in birth rate amongst different demographics in Russia in mind, all putting it aside for a second.
Mm-hmm.
They have not had a replacement birth rate for decades.
That's why they're stealing the children. They're stealing the children. Yeah.
That is part of it. So at this point, given the unbelievable mauling that Ukraine has visited upon these orcish invaders, there is a 75% chance that Russia will collapse demographically within the next 5 years.
That's quick. That's really soon.
So I'm saying 5 years is when it would there's a possibility of that. If that does occur, there is a very high degree of probability that dissolution will be quick, brutal, and chaotic. It is not going to be like the dissolution of the Soviet Union, which in itself had a lot of different risks. I mean, there was actually Soviet hardliners. You ever watched the movie By Dawn's Early Light? It was actually, it aired in 1990. It was based on the idea of unauthorized or accidental launch. That's based on a real event that almost occurred. There were Soviet hardliners at the collapse of the Soviet Union that assaulted a Soviet ballistic missile facility base and was going to drive an SS-13 Robo-Sickle missile into Turkey and fire it at the Soviet Union, because they're like, the Soviet Union collapsed, push the button, see who wins, and initiate an unauthorized exchange between us and the Soviets. So, the CIA actually has declassed reports on its. I'll find it for you. If I can find it, I'll send it to you. They actually talk about that event at the end part of that movie, because it was it was kind of like the 1990s version of The Day After. They were trying to illustrate what are the threats regarding things like the dissolution of the Soviet Union and stockpile stewardship over Soviet nuclear weapons, chemical biological weaponry, all this other stuff, right? That's what kind of underwrote things like the Joint Threat Reduction Cooperation, which Putin violated and reneged on as soon as he came in.
Yeah.
So you have this dissolution, quick, fast, chaotic, brutal. Who sits there and controls Russia? Has the world's largest stockpile of WMDs. Uh-oh. Who gets access to that? Where do they go? How did the Chinese Communist Party... So the Chinese, you think of the Chinese Communist Party, pandemic, Wuhan, COVID-19, now that things have been declassed, I did some of the memos that underwrote the GOP response to the origins of the China pandemic, which very much was out of the Wuhan Biological Institute, and almost assuredly a part and parcel or resultant of the Chinese Communist Party's illegal clandestine offensive bioweapons program, which disproportionately focuses on, for the past 20 years, on genetically modified, racially targeted chimeric-based bioweaponry. So chimeric-based bioweaponry. Where did the Chi-Coms learn that? They learned it from ex-Soviet bioweapons scientists. That was actually the idea of a chimeric, the term chimeric-based bioweaponry actually stems from Project Chimera, which was the Soviets, the last, probably one of the most advanced, publicly acknowledged Soviet bioweapons program in the late 80s before it collapsed. Well, Putin has restarted all of that shit.
Mm-hmm.
Who gets access to that?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So Donald's concern is this. It's not just that you have to win in Putin's regime collapses. and it's not replaced by another ultra-nationalist whack job, some Duganite douche canoe.
Yeah.
It's who, what do you do? How do you ensure stockpile stewardship over this vast WMD stockpile when the system that provides the, in a very perverse, shitty, and evil way, stockpile stewardship no longer is doing that?
Oh my God. Okay, so I think this is a good place to stop, and we're going to pick up this conversation again down the road.
Sorry if I jumped all over the place. It was a really complex kind of topic. I tried to give you as much as I could on this.
No, no,
So
I
I'm a
would
little
like,
bit. I was too. It's my fault. Forgive me.
no,
I did the best I could do.
you did great. And,
Oh,
but
Lauren, thank you for having me.
there's a lot to absorb, and I would really, really like to do this again really soon because we are not done. We are not done. There is a lot to talk about, and I want to be able to tell the audience, more about you and who you are, and we're going to get that done as well because
That's okay.
your life is remarkable. I had another gentleman on the YouTube channel. His name is Bill Gothrop, and I did an interview with him, and you would like that. He's had a lifelong military intelligence career as well. And it's just, I want to say in closing, thank you for your service. I'm going to cry here. You are a remarkable man, and you are the best of us. You really are. And
Sure.
we need to hear your voice. We've got so much work to do and so many things to straighten around. And you know, I don't know. We None of us know what's going to happen. That's what you say. None of us know what is going to happen, but we have to try to do what we can for humanity. And
Make sure that at least
we
the
need to get
maximize the chance for the best outcome.
the American people to have some more empathy for Ukraine. And this has been the hardest thing, is to watch our president be crass and sarcastic about what those people are going through. And that was the reason, that I went over there in 2023, and nobody was going to stop me. And I went over there because I just had to feel it. I had to feel it. I had to smell it, and it was,
Oh, I remember, man. I was worried about you.
everybody was, everybody was. Claire says, um,
Caliber
I,
missiles are impacting, right? I mean, you don't even speak. Do you even know where to go?
yeah, no. And so I went, and I wish that I was in a position where I could go back and forth more. But it was like Ben Shapiro,
He just
recently
did that
went over
yesterday.
there. He
Yeah.
says, "This is not an easy trip." And for me, I'm actually directionally challenged. I get lost a lot. I don't know where
Especially
I
in a
am.
war-torn country, right? That
And
has that Putin laid mines over an area larger than Florida.
well, just to go from the United States all the way over to Ukraine, there's a lot of
Yeah.
transition points that you have to make. There's a lot of stuff to do, and it was a great trip and everything, and I want so badly to go back. And but I wanted to talk to you. I want to ask you one more question, and if you could
Sure.
give me a brief answer, that would be great.
Sure.
Because we need this explained. And everybody that I listen to, I even Chuck Farrar and some of these guys, these military analyst guys that I love listening to, I haven't heard them explain it yet.
Sure.
We know that Putin is losing the war, and we know that
Lost.
the Ukrainians, okay, yeah, exactly, the first week, okay. But when you look at Bakhmut or Toretsk, or you see
Mariupol.
Mariupol, how is that? Um, how do you measure that as a loss? I mean, look at what he's done to those cities over there. He's leveling out cities, and
Yeah.
Ukraine is just being destroyed, chunk by chunk. How is that not? How do you calculate that as a loss with that kind of
So
just destruction?
yeah, you're saying so we did a lot of different people have done assessments. First, it was very kind what you said about me.
Oh,
There are soldiers that sacrificed far more than me. I only do what I do in my own very imperfect way to be worthy of them.
Yeah,
And that
I
includes Ukrainians that have sacrificed their lives, right? When a son of liberty is harmed anywhere, it is felt by the sons of liberty everywhere. My Irish side fled Ireland to fight in the Revolutionary War against the British, and there was something called the Sons of Liberty. That was their motto. I was very kind of what you said.
you're
The
welcome.
ones that deserve that are the ones that aren't here anymore.
Right,
Whether it's my fellow soldiers in GWAT who sacrificed far more than me, or our fellow allies, whether it's in Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan, pick wherever. That's
right.
very kind of you. Now, as far as like doing the analysis, I had to respond to that because
Yeah.
it was unfairly kind to me, right?
Yeah.
Uh, as far as calculating what the damage is, we knew that. So every war, part of this, the war is a complex adaptive system, and actors operate in something called calculate or competitive adaptation. Just because we have one strategy one time, Putin sits there and modifies strategy. It's not like totally dense, right? So we turned the cities into these death traps for armors. So we stopped. He said, okay, he's going to just pummel the cities flat with artillery. Right? That's why I kept pushing for like long range counter battery capability and all this other stuff. Part and parcel of how to, and so the damage that was caused with Putin adopting a now like very Soviet steel broom blow up everything in front of me, right? You
Yeah.
flatten the whole city. I don't have to worry about people hiding in a building to shoot down tanks because there is no building. You know, what was the assessment at? This is when I first met you. It was like 600, 750 billion. I think it's now maybe over 1.5 trillion dollars in just physical capita. How much money it would take to rebuild the areas that have been obliterated
Yeah.
by Putin. That doesn't even take into account things like Putin's criminalized counterintelligence state mining an area that's larger than the state of Florida with things like butterfly mines, which disproportionately kill kids, right? Because it looks like a toy.
Right.
Um, there has been consistent reports by a lot of my colleagues that were over there fighting for Ukraine, tier one, well, just people fighting there that illustrate no uncertain terms that have been low level uses of chemical weapons. And I don't just mean tear gas, right? It's at the very small unit level. Yeah, all this stuff that you have to. So a lot of that stuff's like some of that's persistent. Right? Kids, how do you have to clean that up? It's not
But
just even just building the buildings. You have to demine this whole area. My
yeah,
God,
how are you going to,
talking about
The Kakova Dam, the animals, the environmental damage. I mean, I went to Romania,
the
and
damage of
the
Zaporizhzhia.
oh yeah, the environmental damage is just frightening. But back to my question is how, I mean, it's just hard to calculate um it being a loss
The
when
human misery is incalculable.
what?
So that was the point I was trying to get to. Forgive me in my own clumsy way. The physical capita, we can kind of like take this as stuff, assign a number. What
Okay.
is incalculable, though, and it seems like that's the subtext of your question, is the human misery, the human cost that Putin, the Hitlerian figure that he is,
Yeah.
has visited upon Ukrainians
Yeah.
and undesirable elements in Russia.
Yeah.
Everybody. Who do you think sat there and assisted Hamas's attack against Israel?
Right.
Wagner Hamas in Central Africa.
October 7th is Putin's birthday, which is quite interesting. So when we do this again, I want to dig in deeper into sabotage operations. That's just
That's
something I'm
bumped up. Putin's bumped that up all throughout
so
Europe and the United States.
right. Venezuela, yeah, we're going there. That's going to be really great. Jeffrey Damian Capella, President, Soldiers to Statesmen Foundation. Thank you for coming on the Centrist Post,
Oh, thank you very much for having me,
and
Lauren.
we will see you
Undeserved
soon.
honor.
Thank you
Keep me
so
safe.
much.
To all those out there, Slava Ukraini.
Slava Ukraini, Heroam Slava.